I will go to my grave laughing because the fact that the deaths of 5 million Jews are on my conscience gives me extraordinary satisfaction. This is how extremely cynically the architect of the Holocaust, Adolf Eichmann, spoke about the victims of the genocide. He was at the forefront of launching the Nazi death factory and was the main executor of the inhuman orders of the leadership of the Third Reich. The mass deportation of Jews also took place under his constant control. However, as soon as the regime to which Eichmann had served so faithfully fell, the high-ranking SS officer fled. He was only found 15 years later. How did his own son help catch the war criminal? On December 15, 1961, perhaps the most high-profile trial in the history of Israel ended in Jerusalem. In the dock was an already aging, balding man with glasses. As the charges were read out to him, he smiled in confusion. In the shabby and worn-out man, it was hard to recognize the former head of Department 4D4 of the Reich Main Security Office, Adolf Eichmann. And yet, it was him. Adolf Eichmann was called the architect of the Holocaust. During World War II, he directed all operations to deport European Jews to death camps. After the war, the Nazi criminal disappeared. Eichmann, who was, well, a fairly well-known person in the Reich, not the least, after the fall of the regime, lived for 5 years as a small man in a hunchback in a remote place. No one could find him there. In the 50th year, he left for Argentina via one of the so-called rat lines, red lines, specifically through the Vatican. Rat lines were called well-trodden routes through which Nazi criminals fled from Europe after the war, mainly to South America. In 1950, Adolf Eichmann settled in Buenos Aires under the pseudonym Ricardo Clement. His wife and 3 sons joined him 2 years later, and a 4th son was born in Argentina. For the Israeli authorities, Eichmann was number 1 on the list of the most wanted war criminals. The World Jewish Congress offered a reward of $10,000 for information about his whereabouts. However, the Israeli intelligence agency Mossad was only able to track down the fugitive Nazi 15 years after the end of the war. There are 2 versions. Mossad claims that they received information from a German judge, Fritz Bauer, who neatly provided them with documents stating that Eichmann was living in Argentina. The second version comes from Tuvia Friedman, a well-known Nazi hunter, who says that it was he who found Eichmann, but in both cases the source of information for both the German judge and the Nazi hunter was the same person. This is Lothar Hermann. Lothar Hermann was a German Jew who fled to Argentina before the war to escape Hitler's repression. The emigrant, who went blind in the 1950s, was keenly interested in news about the search for Nazi criminals, and of course, was aware of the Israeli Secret Service's hunt for Adolf Eichmann. Once, Hermann's daughter told him about a new acquaintance, a certain Nicholas Clement. The guy boasted to her that his father was an influential person in the Third Reich, and once even mentioned his real surname, Eichmann. According to one version, Lothar Hermann wrote about this to an acquaintance German judge, who in turn passed the information to Mossad. Mossad agents immediately flew to Buenos Aires and set up surveillance on the house of Adolf Eichmann, or Clement, as he called himself. But they didn't immediately believe that the man living such a modest life, namely Adolf Eichmann, lived in the poorest district of the city and worked as a simple electrician, and that this man who had stolen quite a lot of money and taken it out of Europe could be the former head of Department Wine VDIV. Nevertheless, they continued their investigation, and soon it became clear that it was indeed him. The Israeli authorities feared that a request for the extradition of Adolf Eichmann would lead to his disappearance. After World War II, Argentina became the main haven for fugitive Nazis in the world. President Juan Domingo Perón, who sympathized with Hitler, not only turned a blind eye to the entry into the country of a large number of Germans with fake documents, but also actively helped war criminals hide from justice. Even after the overthrow of the head of state in 1955, pro-Nazi sentiments among the Argentine elite remained quite strong. Therefore, Israel decided to secretly extract Eichmann from South America. The operation to capture the Nazi criminal was called Finale, and it was led by the head of Mossad, Isser Harel. All participants in the operation had been affected by the Holocaust in one way or another, either they or their relatives. A total of 30 people participated in the operation. They all arrived in Argentina individually from different countries and at different times. In Buenos Aires, Mossad agents rented several houses and cars, developed a communication system down to the smallest detail, and devised a plan to abduct Adolf Eichmann. It was necessary to deliver the fugitive Nazi to Israel alive and unharmed to conduct a demonstrative trial over him. The architect of the Holocaust was seized on a deserted street on the evening of May 11, 1960, as he unsuspectingly returned home from work. He got off the bus, walked towards the house, shining a flashlight. They grabbed him, stuffed him into a car. Then began a rather amusing identification of this man. They identified him by scars, under the armpit, where a tattoo had been removed, and by a scar from an appendectomy. Well, to be honest, it was a rather touch-and-go identification. The last doubts that they had Adolf Eichmann were dispelled after the Mossad operatives interrogated the detainee. Before that, they took him to a villa that the operation participants had rented in advance in the suburbs of Buenos Aires. After the first interrogation, Eichmann told them his SS number and his NSDAP party membership number. Also, after he finally realized whose hands he was in, he gave his real name, admitting, yes, it was indeed him, Adolf Eichmann. After that, he was kept at the villa for about 9 days, and the operatives literally did not take their eyes off him. Extracting Adolf Eichmann from a country that almost openly sympathized with the Nazis turned out to be much more difficult than abducting him. There was no regular air service between Israel and Argentina. However, a solution was found. To evacuate the architect of the Holocaust, Mossad decided to use the plane of the Israeli delegation, which arrived in Buenos Aires on an official visit on May 19th and was to return home the next day. Since Eichmann had previously played the role of an electrician, he had to play another role. He was injected with strong drugs, dressed in the uniform of an Israeli pilot, and under the guise of a pilot who felt very ill, in an unconscious state, he was taken to Israel. On May 22nd, Tel Aviv officially announced the capture of the most wanted Nazi criminal. The Argentine authorities accused Israel of violating the country's sovereignty and illegally conducting an operation on foreign territory. But according to the official version, Eichmann was abducted by some Jewish volunteers who were not in state service. The Argentines were unable to prove Mossad's involvement in the case. Meanwhile, among the Nazis hiding in the South American country, real panic began. To be fair, at that time in Buenos Aires, there was another person who was definitely a Nazi war criminal. This was Joseph Mengele, the Angel of Death. He was a doctor who conducted utterly barbaric experiments on concentration camp prisoners. They scared him off. After that, he went to Brazil, where he lived quietly for almost another 20 years. But Adolf Eichmann was never able to escape responsibility for his atrocities. On April 11, 1961, the architect of the Holocaust stood before an Israeli court. The trial of the Nazi criminal lasted 8 months. Adolf Eichmann had no chance to evade the charges brought against him by the Israeli court because a huge amount of evidence had been collected, as well as numerous testimonies from witnesses who were victims of the Holocaust and Nazi crimes committed by Eichmann. He was given the harshest sentence, which the Israeli state only imposed in exceptional cases. This was the death penalty by hanging. However, Adolf filed a petition for clemency, but the president of Israel justly rejected it. Adolf Eichmann was hanged on the night of June 1, 1962, in a prison in the Israeli city of Ramla. He entered the history of the Jewish state not only as the architect of the Holocaust, but also as the last criminal executed by court order. After the hanging, Eichmann's body was burned, and the ashes were scattered over the Mediterranean Sea outside Israel's territorial waters. What do you think about it? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your opinion is very important to me. Don't forget to give me a like if you liked it, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new episodes. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.